Welcome to Brew Cheese, where we brew up the finest of cheese. I'm Micah, and thanks for tuning in. If you're new to our channel, we brew up commander decks on a $50 budget, often with an unexpected twist. And we are back. I know you guys have been asking for a while, Micah, when are you going to make another video? I've been asking for a while, Micah, when are you going to make another video? Well, I'm making another video. Now you might be saying, Micah, since you're back and Kaldheim's here, you're going to be doing new Kaldheim stuff, right? So why are these Commander Legends commanders on the screen? Well, I'm going to tell you. I initially built a deck around this guy here, Finn. But, well, without black, the deck kind of actually felt like it was missing a whole half of the Death Touch spectrum that really makes Death Touch great. So, I retooled the deck a little bit around these two here. So first, we have Halana Kessig Ranger. She's a green and 3 for a 3/4 human archer with reach. And when another creature enters the battlefield under our control, we can pay an extra 2. And when we do, the creature deals damage equal to its power to target creature. And it's got partner. And we partnered it with Falthus Shadow Cat Familiar. It's a black and 2 for a 2/2 Nightmare Cat, and it gives our commanders Menace and Death Touch. And it's also got partner. So yeah, you may have guessed, this is a Death Touch tribal deck. And Halana offers Death Touch a really nice tool. You can just pay an extra 2 when you bring out a Death Touch creature, and it does a one-sided fight to something, and you mow down the rest of the board in no time. Falthus is mostly just there to give black color identity to the deck, but it also comes with Death Touch and it's in the command zone, so it fits pretty well. Finn the Fangbearer is in the deck. It's a 1/3 with Death Touch. It's a human warrior, and it costs a green and 1. And when a creature you control with Death Touch deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 2 poison counters. If you want to see the deck I built around him, it's down in the video description. I want to take a little bit of an opportunity with this reboot to retool the way we do some things. Instead of going through and listing every single card in the deck, I figured I'd go through and give you the highlights. The rest of the deck you can probably fill with just about anything and it'll work fine. Although if you want to see my full deck list, it's also in the video description. So I'm only going to be covering 2 ramp pieces, and that's because they help our Death Touch plan out. The first is Leyline Prowler. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch and Lifelink, and it taps to add a mana of any color. Pretty good when we're running 2 different colors. The Lifelink will give us a little bit of longevity, but we're mostly happy that it's a Death Touch and it's a mana dork. Deathcap Cultivator, by default, doesn't have Death Touch. It only has that if we have 4 or more card types in our graveyard, but it does tap for a black or a green. We have a few ways to enable Delirium in the deck, so it may have Death Touch, but not right off the bat. It's not the only card in the deck that cares about having Delirium either. One of our Death Touch creatures, for instance, is Gnarlwood Dryad. It's got Death Touch, and if we have Delirium, then it turns into a 3/3 instead of a 1/1. A few things in the draw package I want to discuss is things like Death Reap Ritual. It draws us a card on any end step in which a creature died that turn. Even though we don't really have a lot of flash Death Touch creatures in the deck, we do have the ability to kill stuff pretty regularly on our turn, so this will probably represent an extra 1 card on our turn. Cheville, Bane of Monsters, is a 2 mana 1/3 with Death Touch, but on our upkeep we get to put a bounty counter on something, and as long as we kill it that turn, then we'll get to draw a card and gain 3 life, and get the chance to put a bounty counter on something next turn. Harvester of Souls is another Death Touch creature, and it draws us a card whenever another non-token creature dies, something that should ideally be happening a lot. We've also got its mirror image in the deck. If you've never realized it, Soul of the Harvest is the mirror image of Harvester of Souls. It draws us a card whenever another non-token creature enters our battlefield. It doesn't have Death Touch, but it's another big creature, and it draws us cards. And you'll see why having big creatures matters a little bit later on. Kothafed Soul Hoarder is another big creature, with flying though, and whenever a permanent owned by another player is put into a graveyard, we're going to lose a life and draw a card. You do have to watch yourself with Kothafed around any decks that are something like Aristocrats decks. If they start sacrificing a bajillion tokens, then you're going to lose the game without them having to do anything. But in most situations, Kothafed just draws you a bunch of cards with what you're already doing. Ulvenwald Tracker acts as a sort of backup to Halana, and also a way to get some extra mileage out of the Death Touch creatures we're playing. We can pay 2 mana into it, tap it, and have one of our creatures fight another creature. It's not the one-sided fight like Halana is, but it does let us kill stuff at instant speed. We're also running Acidic Slime in our removal package, primarily because it's a Death Touch creature, but it also destroys a wide variety of things, artifacts, enchantments, or problematic lands. We're running Vraska, Swarm's Eminence. She's 2 Golgari Golgari for a 5 loyalty planeswalker, and anytime one of our Death Touch creatures hits our opponent, it gets a +1/+1 counter on it. It can also be -2 a couple times to make 1/1 Death Touch assassins that when they hit a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. Grave Betrayal costs a little bit to get out, and it also costs a little bit, but it's very worth it in the deck. Anytime we kill off a creature, we get to put it right back on our battlefield, and when we have the choice of the entire battlefield on what to kill, then we have our choice on what to grab. Ogre Slumlord cranks out a 1/1 rat anytime a non-token creature dies, something that's going to be happening pretty often, and it also gives all those rats Death Touch, further fueling our mission. Viridian Longbow gets to equip to something and lets it tap to deal a damage to another creature or player, but we're mostly worried about it dealing damage to creatures. Nemesis Mask can go on one of our creatures, and anytime it attacks, everything has to block it. That's pretty handy for letting the rest of our Death Touch creatures get through, but it also means that we have our choice of blockers on what to kill. And even more if our Death Touch creature has power higher than 1. We can probably kill off 2-3 things. Alright, so let's move on to the actual Death Touch creatures that I keep talking about. So we're going to start with Hooded Blightfang. That's a must-have in the deck. It's a 1/4 snake with Death Touch, and whenever a creature we control with Death Touch attacks, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. And whenever a creature we control with Death Touch deals damage to a planeswalker, destroy that planeswalker. And that's not the only incidental drain we'll be doing too. Poison Tip Archer is another Death Touch creature, also with Reach, which is a pretty nice combination, that whenever another creature dies, each opponent loses 1 life. Reaper of the Wilds is a 4/5 that scries for 1 whenever something dies, and we can pay to give it Death Touch or Hexproof until end of turn. Occam Adversary is a little bit more draw power in the deck. It's a green and 3, although it costs 2 less if anybody else has a green permanent. Considering how popular green is in Commander, that's pretty likely. But it's a 2/3 with Death Touch, and when it deals damage to a player, we get to draw a card. Izareth the Awakener is a 3 mana 3/3 with Death Touch, which is a pretty good rate. When it attacks, we can pay X, and we get to return something that costs X from our graveyard to our battlefield. By the way, that will trigger Halana again, so we can pay 2 to have it fight something. Virtus the Veiled is probably one of the best Death Touch creatures out there. It's a 1/1 with Death Touch, but when it deals damage to a player, they lose half their life rounded up. It partners with Gorm the Great, which we're also running, mostly because when we play Gorm, we get to go tutor at Virtus, but also Gorm helps with our overall plan. When we attack with it, it grabs the attention of a couple of their blockers. Pretty similar to Virtus is Graveblade Marauder. It's a 1/4 with Death Touch, and when it deals combat damage to a player, they lose life equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard. That may not be very many depending on how well the game is going for us, but if we've lost a good amount of creatures, then it can be pretty devastating. Embodiment of Agonies is a truly terrifying thing in this deck. It's a 0/0 with Flying and Death Touch, but it enters with +1/+1 counters on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. We're running a 2-color deck, so we're going to have a lot of different types of mana costs. Speaking of Flying Death Touchers, Bone Picker is a pretty cheap one because most of the time it's only going to cost a single black, because it's 3 less if a creature died this turn. It's a 3/2 with Flying and Death Touch. Now, Trample combines pretty well with Death Touch, because there's this interesting thing that happens. When a creature with both Trample and Death Touch gets blocked, it only has to assign Lethal to the blocker, which if it has Death Touch is 1 damage, and the rest gets to trample over. So overrun effects are pretty potent with the deck, and that's what we're running here. It gives all of our creatures +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. We're also running Overwhelming Stampede, which is a pretty similar effect except it's +X, where X is the greatest power among creatures. And that's why I was making such a big deal about playing those 6/6 creatures earlier. But then having Overwhelming Stampede in equipment form helps too. Dragon Throne of Tarkir equips to something, gives us the ability to pay 2 and tap that thing to give all of our other creatures +X, where that's the equipped creature's power, and trample until end of turn. Now it is going to give the equipped creature Defender, but we're probably not going to be doing a lot of attacking with Halana herself or one of our draw creatures. Alright, so if we're picking off everybody else's creatures, and we have a board full of them, what's going to look pretty tempting to them? That's right, board wipes. They're going to be reaching for them and tutoring for them whenever they can, so we need to be prepared. That's why we're running Golgari Charm. It has the ability to regenerate all of our creatures, but in a pinch it can also destroy an enchantment or give all creatures -1/-1 until end of turn. We're very likely only going to be using it to regenerate all of our creatures. That's why we're also running Rapid Vigor. It's a poor man's heroic intervention because it regenerates all of our creatures and allows us to evade a board wipe. Destined to Lead is also a pretty nice card in this deck. It gives a single creature +1/+0 and indestructible until end of turn, allowing us to save our commander or one of our important pieces. The lead half, on the other hand, if we cast it out of our graveyard, makes all creatures have to block the creature that we target with it. That allows us to put it on one thing and get all of our Death Touchers through, and whatever we cast it on gets to live through the combat. Not only that, but since it has Death Touch, it'll probably take out quite a few blockers with it. Alright, and I'm not going to talk about all the lands we're going to be playing, but I am going to point out a few that I feel are important, like Detection Tower. It taps for colorless. We can pay 1 and tap, and our opponents and their creatures effectively lose hexproof until end of turn. This is pretty handy with Halana's ability, because it allows us to take out hexproof creatures. And to help us with getting Delirium, we're running things like Evolving Wilds, Terramorphic Expanse, Myriad Landscape, and Blighted Woodland, all of which are lands that can go to the graveyard to get us other lands, helping us to get those critical 4 card types. Hissing Quagmire turns into a Death Touch creature, which, while that doesn't really work out with Halana, we might as well run it along with our other guild gates. And finally, Grim Backwoods taps for colorless, or we can pay 2 black-green into it and tap it to sack a creature to draw a card. That lets us make use of some of our Death Touch creatures after they've already done their job. The full deck list for the video is down in the video description, along with the one for the Fynn deck that I compiled. Thank you for watching, and if you like what we're doing here, subscribe or share this video with a friend, or leave a comment telling us what we missed or what you'd like to see in the future. See you again next video.